Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar hosted by the Consortium for Innovation in Post-Harvest Loss and Food Waste Reduction. My name is Kyle Poorman, and for all intents and purposes, I'm the moderator for this event. This is our inaugural webinar in a series that will occur monthly. And so we're very excited that you could join. Take time out of your day to be with us. Not only are we excited because it's our first webinar, but Wageningen University and Research is taking the wraps off of its post-harvest loss and food waste monitoring protocol. That's exciting in itself, but it's also exciting that this protocol will be used in value chain research assessments going forward for the consortium and for others. Just a bit on some housekeeping measures. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed. So about 100 people can be in the webinar room because of our license, and the overflow, an unlimited number of people can live stream the event. We are also recording it so that we can put it on our website immediately when it is available, so you can view it again or view it at your leisure. Let me introduce myself. My name is Kyle Poorman. I'm the Consortium Communications Manager, and I'm joined by Joost Snels, Jan Broos, and Dirk Meyer as panelists for the webinar. Our agenda is as such. We're going to have a real quick introduction about the consortium. We're going to have a presentation on the protocol. We'll have a question and answer session. We'll ask you to register your interest, and then we'll plug our upcoming webinars at the end. So again, thank you so very much. And I would remiss if I didn't thank all of our consortium members, including our funders, the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, and the Rockefeller Foundation. I just want to make a quick shout out and thank you to the Ed Schneider Center at the University of Maryland, for your hard work in putting this webinar on. Thank you to Nicholas, Stevie, Rashri, and the whole team for your work. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Dirk Meyer, of the director of the consortium, to introduce the consortium and then introduce our other two panelists.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, all right. So thank you, Kyle, for introducing and moderating this panel, and you've already acknowledged our partners and the others that are helping to organize this. I want to thank you all participants for joining us for this first webinar of a new series that our Consortium for Innovation in Post-Harvest Loss and Food Waste Reduction is organizing. And our mission is to bring together thought leaders and experts from across the globe, academia, industry, government, nonprofits, to help food producers and food system stakeholders across the globe utilize resources more effectively and efficiently in preserving nutritious food, improve lives and livelihoods. And you know, that is become about as important and as pertinent during this current pandemic period as ever, you know, throughout the world. And we do appreciate the funding that we have received through the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research and Rockefeller Foundation for this consortium, and we look forward to all of you participating, interested in working with us, you know, going forward. I'm very pleased to introduce our two subject matter experts and presenters, Dr. Jan Broos and Mr. Joost Snels. Both of them have been part of our consortium from the very beginning, and they are research engineers with Wageningen Food and Bio-Based Research, and they will share with us their new protocol for monitoring post-harvest loss and food waste and associated greenhouse gas emissions, a protocol that the consortium is looking to utilize in our various research projects in our partner countries. And so with that, I turn it back to Kyle so that Jan and Joost can get started. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer, and I will turn it over to Jan Broos for his presentation.
Yes, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Doug. I will start sharing my screen. Do you see a full screen PowerPoint now?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody to this presentation on the new methodology that we are working on for assessing and quantifying post-harvest losses and food waste in a value chain. We are very glad that you have shown such a great interest in this presentation, and I hope this can help you, and maybe we can generate better understanding and more control of food loss and waste, and help contributing to food and nutrition in the world. I will address the following 4 subjects in this presentation. First, I give a short reflection on the frameworks for food loss and waste monitoring that already exist. We do not replace these frameworks, but we hope to add something to them and also sometimes to rely on them and improve their value. I will explain how we came to a more accessible and adequate approach that looks more, that tries not only to monitor the food loss and waste, but also to help identifying causes and better solutions to reduce these losses. I will pinpoint on some design principles that we used, and then I further dive into the protocol. To start with something about our motivation, and I think it's a motivation that many of us have. We want to contribute to improving food and nutrition security, and that goes partly through reducing food loss and waste. Maybe I can hide this. Okay, yes, that's great. We are all aware that quantitative insight is essential. So which volume of the produce is lost, but also understanding which food loss and waste stream is most significant. What could be the investment space? So what opportunity is generated to solve this problem? But it's not only quantitative insight, it's also a qualitative understanding of the food waste, but also of the situation and potential solutions. So what is wasted? What can you still do with it? What are causes for the food waste? Can the cause be, is the cause occurring at the place where the food is wasted, or is it induced by some choices made elsewhere in the food supply chain, or in the food production and supply chain? Which intervention could really reduce these food loss and waste? Do you not transfer the problem to another stage in the supply chain, or can you really reduce it? Do they fit in the complex food system? Do they fit in the socio-economic system, etc.? But not only finding solutions that reduce food loss and waste, but also finding solutions that contribute to other sustainability goals. And there we think especially of climate change, but I think there are also many local problems that also have to be faced when thinking of interventions. So which interventions fit in really a sustainable future? And we came to this kind of view based on the work that we did in the CCAS project. To start with, we have looked at existing frameworks and approaches for food loss and waste. One of the most known is the protocol developed by the World Resource Institute, which has formulated protocols for really weighing, counting food waste streams or food losses, how to analyze the composition of such streams. Some situations not doing the direct measurements, but using surveys, or even at a higher level, doing a material flow analysis to get some understanding of food losses and waste, using modeling approaches to come to some guesstimates of the food losses and waste, and sometimes even using proxy data. We do not replace that. I think we can build further on this in our protocol. And there are also many other organizations working on this, contributing to the understanding of food losses and waste, giving good secondary data, models, etc. These approaches, they are very adequate for giving complete inventories. For instance, the WRI protocol helps in measuring all the data, very suitable for benchmarking, as they also explain, for comparing country situations, etc. But what we want to do in our analysis is not only assessing the volumes of the food losses and waste, but also helping in identifying causes and interventions. And we think that identifying such causes and interventions requires understanding of the food losses and waste in the context of the whole food chain and food system. To start with, we think it's relevant to understand material flows in those in the food supply chain. What volumes of products stay in the supply chain, and what volumes go to other destinations. So we do not distinguish really the product that stays in the chain and the product that is lost, but also look at other streams that go to donations, that could go to processing, to food ingredient, could be sent to a secondary food market outlet, or streams that are used as animal feed can still be available to use, can go to energy generation or other uses. And finally, there's, I think, what is really in the core of food waste is waste treatment. In our approach, we will prioritize streams or losses, but it depends. It could also be one of those other streams, as mentioned here, that go to other destinations and that have the potential for better valorization, so that could stay in the food system. And we do not want to start with a fixed definition of food loss and waste. So depending on the situation, animal feed can still be a very valuable use. But sometimes we want to keep the system product as a food product. We realized in our analysis, we are very much aware there are two perspectives. On one perspective, there's the perspective of the governmental level. There you want to really understand complete food losses and waste. It's more the direct measurement, as the WRI protocol also proposed. But we will start with the value chain level. So there we want to start working towards solutions that reduce the total losses. We want to help to support monitoring progress and performance based on defined KPIs. And we want to focus on implementable solutions with acceptable levels of return on investment. So to be clear, our current approach is focused on the value chain level. And later we can, we are thinking how to generalize it to the other levels. What we want to work on is to find effective solutions, so that really reduce the food loss and waste at chain level, and that at the same time are sustainable solutions. So solutions that reduce environmental impact per unit food product available for consumption. For that, we want to analyze solutions, but first we have to identify solutions, and we want to understand causes of the waste. And for that we need information about food losses and waste and inefficiencies along the food chain. And in the end, we also want to, we hope that we find practical solutions that are feasible in practice, so we want to work towards implementable solutions. Some leading principles for these for the protocol that we are presenting now is the intended functionality. It should really we want to estimate the food losses and waste qualitatively and quantitatively. We want to understand the generation of those losses and wastes from the food perspective. So also looking at external drivers that may cause the losses, and also look at how environmental and governmental and other drivers may affect the success of potential interventions. We also want to assess the effectiveness of these interventions and potential sustainability effects they may have. And design principles, in our view, are that the method should be lean. It should support in focusing on essential parts of the chain and essential streams in the system. But also we want to minimize the efforts needed to come to such a focus. Therefore, we want to minimize the direct measurements. And therefore, we propose some pragmatic approaches. We want to start with making an overview of a food supply chain or of a food system using existing knowledge. And there we think that experts and secondary data are very helpful. And only optionally do some actual physical measurements, but limit these measurements to what we define as being a hotspot in the food system. So we have structured this in six steps. The first step is a scoping step. There we define the food system together with a client or some interested party in the subject, and we define what is in scope and what is out of scope. We define also what they consider valuable on what they consider waste, and this step is used as this is the first step in the protocol. The next step, number 2, is what we call flow. Here we define a flow diagram of the food chain, supply chain or the food system under consideration. We define the actors in that system, the volume of the product flows that includes volume of products that really go to the intended market, but also describes the flows that go to other destinations. So that could be again be food waste, but it could also be streams that go to animal feed and other streams at other destinations that I mentioned before. Based on that overview, we want to come to a more focus, to prioritize activities or streams that have high priority, either because the food loss and waste is critical, or the volumes are unknown and could be very high, or because experts estimated that they give good potential for optimization. Then in step 4, which we consider optional, in step 4 we may further do some additional measurements in case the volumes estimates defined in step 2 are unsure, or if they are very variable, then it may be very relevant to have better understanding of these side streams or secondary uses or wastes, and then we propose to do some additional measurements. And the next step, step 5, we will support the identification of causes for the food losses and waste. And finally, in step 6, we propose some interventions. I will explain these steps a bit more in following slides. But to start with, I want to stress that the flow phase is essential in our approach. So here we do a resource assessment. We map all the flows instead of doing complete measuring of the food loss and waste. So we help in gaining insights in all flows in the food chain, and we think that this helps on focusing on the side streams or waste that are essential in the further identification of main causes and interventions for the food waste. I will further explain now the steps in the following slides. The first step is the scope phase. Here we define all the part of the food supply system that is in scope. We define the KPIs. We also define the level of details that are relevant for an adequate insight in the system. We try to bring on the table all relevant background information that is available, and it may help in finding some good estimates in the next phase. And we also agree on some experts who are expected to help creating the food system flow diagram and estimates of volumes in the next phase. And we think that this step should be done in dialogue with the client, sponsor, or company who's interested in the results, and who's also a stakeholder in this food system. The next step is in the next step we generate a material flow diagram of this food system. In this material flow diagram, we list all the actors in the food supply chain and all their activities. We also list the volumes of product flows. And again, I want to stress that these are the products that stay in the food supply chain, but also what is considered food loss and waste, and also streams that go to other destinations. And information sources that we use here are, on one hand, experts. Sometimes we may use secondary data. very much depending on the situations. And on the right here, you see three tables or diagrams. We consider the first one as an intermediate result. This is just a rough chain diagram showing actors in that system and how they are connected. Next, in the flow B, we dive into a more detailed description of each of these actors. Could also be a grouped set of actors. I hope you can read it, but I don't know whether this fits in your resolution. But here we indicated that we have a set of smallholder farmers who do certain activities, have certain flows from different activities, like they may have some a part of their product may be left on the field. Certain flows may go to animal feed, others may go to a landfill. So we want to distinguish all these streams because these are streams that we may later on focus on in the following step. We do that for all the stakeholders that we identified in the first diagram. And next we combine all these findings in one table where we distinguish all the activities. So we put the activities in one row, all the destinations of all the individual streams, list the volumes, the percentage of the flows of the stakeholder going to a certain destination, the potential economic value of those streams, and the chance of a potential of the acceptability of a certain intervention at that level. And with this information, we go to the next step, because then together with oh my God, together with the client or the sponsor or funder of this work, we can decide which activities are most critical, which streams are most interesting for interventions later on. And that's happening in the third phase, in the focus phase. Here, together with a client, sponsor, or company, we want to prioritize activities that have highest priority for further interventions. And it could be because food loss and waste is high in that stage, critical or unknown, so that we want to dive further into that. Or it could be that these are expected to give best potential for optimization. So in this step, we use the results from the previous step, we discuss it with a client, and together with him, we can decide on which are the hotspots in the system. Next step would be the actual measurements. So when necessary, we can do actual measurements on these hotspots. And but we think because we have defined a focus before doing these actual measurements, we can limit the number of measurements and the efforts related to that to a minimum. And there again, we can use protocols that existing protocols. Next step is we want to work towards solution of these food losses and waste, so how to reduce them. For that, we want to identify the roles of the stakeholders and how their activities affect the generation of the food losses and waste. So we want to come to solutions, taking away causes for food losses and waste, or find potential solutions. And this step will be supported by a causal database we are working on. The next step is identifying or selecting or developing interventions. For that, again, we also provide a database. In this phase, it's also essential to evaluate the potential effectiveness of such interventions. That can be done through a theoretical analysis, but maybe there are situations where you can compare situations with or without the intervention, and that may also give an idea about the potential effect of such an intervention. But we also consider it essential not to only look at the local effect at the stakeholder, but also indirect effects of such intervention along the supply chain, because we have seen it sometimes that you may reduce the losses at one stage of the supply chain, but if it results in a surplus in the next step, it will not solve a problem. So then it is not a good intervention. And well, should not only be done along the supply chain, but also in the total food system. And think of socio-economic drivers, legislation, or cultural habits that will also affect the effectiveness of such an intervention. We think in the current situation that not only we should look at the effectiveness on the food loss and waste reduction, but also looked at trade-offs on other sustainability issues. For instance, on greenhouse gas emissions. We have developed a calculator that may help in estimating such effects. This is done part of the CCAF's project. You can find it on the CCAF's website, and I think in follow-up webinars we will explain something more about this. This protocol is supported by a dedicated explanation, instructions, and questionnaire. We will make this available to you I think on a short notice. So these are more or less instructions that may guide you through this process and may help you in applying this into practice. And here I want to finish my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. I think that was very informative, and we are going to move then to our question and answer session. So there are a number of ways that you can ask questions. So I would say that the first way is that there is a question and answer chat function that can be used in the webinar. So we have about 108 people in the webinar, which is our capacity right now, and we have a number of people on Facebook Live. I think I'm 50 or more. So for those people on Facebook Live, we have our consortium program manager, Cassie McGee, there's a discussion chat function there, so you can ask your questions in that form for the Facebook Live, and the questions and answer in the webinar. If neither of those work, you can email me as well. So you all should have my email address as well. Let's get started with this question and answer session. Let me just share my screen real quickly here.
I can stop sharing.
Yeah, so from Carla Fabi from FAO. She asks, will the causes and interventions databases be open? So Jan or Joost, that's the first question.
Yeah, well, Joost, can you reply to that?
Yeah, of course I can. Well, it's not a semantic discussion of what is open. Within our protocol, there will be a database that has the at least the causes related to a certain kind of food loss and waste. So that will be is in development, but that will be available. When the discussion is it an open or open source that everybody can add, we are not in the process right now how to organize that. But at the end, we are striving to a system that is as open and as filled as possible. So that's something that is in development. But at the end, all that we are developing, it will be available and open for use, just as an answer.
Okay, great. Now we have a number of questions coming in now. So the next question is from Alex Winter Nelson. The protocol measures flow using tons. What are the advantages and implications of using this measure rather than dollar value or calories or another unit of measure?
Yes, that's a nice question. I think if you express it in tons, then we are not only looking at the current value, but if we express all the current waste flows in the current economic value, then it will be very low, and we want to know the potential when reducing those food losses and waste. So when valorizing those streams at a higher economic value. So of course we are also one of the columns in the table that is in our system is in the potential economic value. So there you come to dollars, and this also helps in defining the investment space. But the basic understanding, if you have the volumes in tons, helps in also assessing the extent of the food loss and waste.
Thank you, Jan. I have another question from Jana Mbuko from the University of Nairobi. She says, it seems like the tool seeks to reduce, minimize direct measurements. I thought there were possible direct measurements under different contexts, and it gives a more realistic and reliable data, although it is expensive. That's the question.
I recognize that, and I think that's also very important, because I think if we look at the data sets that are available on food loss and waste, it's very limited. But we think that even the small data set that is available is sometimes not generated with the same definitions of food loss and waste, for instance, and consequently sometimes very misleading. So we think that at least first defining this food, the flow, doing the flow analysis, and having a good understanding of where the product goes and what are reasons for those losses is essential to say something about potential interventions. Because very often we hear that the food waste stream is 10 or 20%, and it's very unclear what it means in practice. So we need a description of the context. And then still, as we have in step 4, if data are lacking, we also need those additional measurements. So then again, we rely on existing protocols like the WRI has defined, which again we hope to improve in the coming years. But again, that will be essential. But with a context description.
Okay, thank you, Jan. I have a question from that says, how is this method different from the food loss and waste? And I'm not sure if you get different from the FAO food loss and waste presentation that was presented a month ago. Could you answer that question? I'm not sure if you're Jan, Joost.
No, I don't have the chart now.
Okay, all right. I actually know that Carla's in the webinar right now, so I would imagine that we could hook you up and talk about the differences between them. But we did right now. I'm sorry, Kazito. We can't compare and contrast the two methods right now.
I must say I have seen the presentation. I recognized some elements in it, and I was aware there were some things, but I think we have to further describe it, and maybe that's even a way to further develop both methods, and maybe integrate some things.
Okay. I have a question from Rashid Suleiman from the University of Sequoia. Will this protocol be available to us, is his question.
I think in line with the answer by Joost, yes.
No, I said that's an easy answer. Yes, it will. And I saw also somewhere in a question, is it also available to validate and to use? And that's specifically what we will ask at the end of this session. And we are looking forward to get it out in the open and to get it into the field and really making use of the tables and the questionnaires that we have developed, just to see if it works in real practice. It's not that we didn't do it yet. There are several projects where we use it already, but yeah, it's available. Yes, and we want to be in contact with, let's say, students or others, organizations that want to use it, and we can guide them with that. And as a return, we really want their feedback and to show us how it works in practice, and if it could be more practical or not. So the answer is definitely yes.
Yes, and to add to that, as we also discussed in the previous question, the world is very hungry. We need more data. Everybody needs more data to better control the food loss and waste. So I would be very happy if through this work together we could generate more data. So please.
Great, and so I think we have another one from Murio that says, will the tables presented and the program used be available for use and validation in different countries? I think you probably answered that, but go ahead again.
Yeah, that's the yes, and that's was the question I was referring to. Yeah, and that's well, it's later on, but as a follow-up, there will be a next webinar where we explain in more detail how it works, how the tables look like, how to use it, so then we can be in more in depth. So when people are willing to use it, that's the occasion to really share the insights and make it available to the people that are willing to use it.
Great. I think I'm going to package two questions into one. Oh, go ahead.
Kyle, can you hear me?
Yes, just Dr.
Yes,
Mann.
right. So I think to add to what Joost and Jan are mentioning is that from the consortium perspective, we're very interested in collaborating with others that are willing to utilize the protocol and help collect data in their respective geographic location and particular value chains, and then bring all of that together in a facilitated manner. So yes, we're very interested in collaborating with people on utilizing the protocol, exchanging experience in utilizing the protocol, and further refining it. The idea is to use it in a very practical manner and in a manner that can easily be utilized by in research projects without having to hire, entire huge teams and have high expenses associated with it, which is one of the challenges I think that a number of protocols have had in the past.
Good. I think that that leads right into a number of questions that I'm going to package together. Okay, so first one is asking, what are some practical challenges with this protocol? What might be a typical cost range for doing such an analysis, if you have that? And then how do you solve kind of data quality issues? Those are all big questions, but I'm packaging them together because we're, okay? So those are 3 questions.
Very challenging questions. Thank
yes.
you. Our first idea when working on this protocol is that we wanted something that could be doable within 1 week. So on the workflow, we also called it the 1 week protocol. How can we get a good idea about food loss and waste occurring in a typical supply chain? And I think if you can identify a number of experts who have a good view on the operational practice in a particular supply chain, and who also knows or has a sense of what is happening, what are all the individual actors in that supply chain, or at least representative actors along that supply chain do, then you could do this in a few days, because then I typically the first scope phase is a good discussion with the company, and maybe somebody in the company who also has contact with some experts and knows that he has a good view on the system. Then at least in the next phase, that's the flow phase, making the flow diagram. We show something in Excel, but you can also make papers or tables on paper. That's not essential. So it doesn't. You don't need a lot of actual computer working, etc. It's very optional. Of course, if you want to make a good report, then it's essential to do that. But that's not necessarily done within that inventory. And then it depends really on the expertise on the knowledge of those experts. I think if you meet, say 3, otherwise you have no idea about variation, and they give a comparable view on the system, they give comparable estimates of the flows, then I think I would rely that it is quite good. But if there's a large variation amongst them, then it would be a signal that obviously the knowledge of the system is quite poor, and you may need additional either experts, or this is a flag saying that it may be essential to do some measurements. And we all know that doing actual measurements is quite labor intensive. First, organizing this, doing good direct measurements is quite intensive. And as WRI also explained, sometimes, again, you can use alternatives for that. Maybe using secondary data is adequate, but that's quite depending on the situation. So we cannot say that interviewing 3 experts is enough. It depends on the situation. But at least it is indicative as a first step to doing that. And then going to the next phase of the focus selection, I think that's again a good meeting, good discussion with some people, which can be done in a few hours' time. Then going to the causes and interventions, yeah, that's again an expert step, and there again assessing the interventions will take some time. Depends on the expertise. But I think it can be done in 1 week if you are lucky with these experts.
Great.
And if not, you need additional analysis.
Great. Yeah, we're getting close to the hour mark here, so I will just ask you a few more questions. First of all, we have a question about, do you have an idea of model crop? Are there ground studies in process for the protocol? And is this protocol applicable to small and medium-sized developing countries? I think those all go together.
Can you repeat the first questions?
Yes. Yes. So first of all, is there a model crop to use the protocol or a set of crops to use the protocol? 1. 2 is, are there ongoing pilots or planned pilots for, projects for the protocol? And is the protocol applicable to small and medium-sized companies or in countries, in developing countries? So that's...
Yes, thank you. To start with, we will fill this causal database and interventions database. We will build it on the existing knowledge that we have and that we can derive from literature. And that means that there will be quite a lot of crops in that. For sure, it will not be complete, but the data set will explain the crops that are in there. And there will be especially also crops typical for developing countries. And of course, this will also address the small and medium sized enterprises. We try to cover the whole chain from production and supply chain. That can be very simple production and supply chain, smallholder based, but it could also be a more advanced supply chain. And we are very much aware that it should not only address high-tech and expensive solutions. I think we really need the low and medium tech solutions in there. And I hope that at least some of these interventions can also bring forward the small and medium enterprises. And to address the last questions, we will start with, at the minimum is that we will start using this protocol within our consortium. So some of the universities involved in this consortium will use this for students. And I hope we, in the same time, also others will be happy to adopt it. Does this address your question?
Yes, it did. We're, I think, now running up on a number of, on a deadline here, but I just want to say on kind of some logistical issues, the presentation slides, we have a number of questions on the presentation slides. The presentation slides will be available on the consortium website, reducephl.org or .com. They'll be up there. They're not up there yet. They've also been sent out to all the registration list. Also, if you have more questions about the consortium, we have some questions about the consortium. Our contact information is on the website. You should have my email address, but all the consortium contact information is on our website as well. And I'm going to answer a few questions that I know. Here is that we are, from Dr. Rashid, we're definitely looking for students, and so to use this protocol, and so that's one of the reasons why we're having this webinar is to socialize it, and so we're we're very interested in getting students involved. So I think that segues. I apologize. We have more questions than we can answer at this time, but we have to wrap it up here. So let me just share my screen and finish out the webinar, and I apologize. All right. First of all, as a follow-up to this webinar, to this more general webinar, in 2 weeks' time, we're planning an online training related to the protocol. So that's in 2 weeks' time, and it is at 3 p.m. Central European summertime in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. And I'm blanking on what day that is, but it's 2 weeks from today. If you want to be a part of that, we would like you to express your interest. And so we have, there's a website at the bottom here that you can go to, and it'll be, click on the interest form, and you will put your information in, and then we will contact you about ongoing steps to use this protocol to socialize it for you. So that will be in 2 weeks' time. So it's a next step in the process. And so we're nearing the end of the night. So I wanted to thank you all for taking the time for this webinar. And then I'm going to plug our next webinar. It'll be in 3 to 4 weeks. We haven't exactly set the date yet, but I have all your email addresses, so you will receive an email from me about the next webinar. We are having a series of webinars monthly going forward, hosted by the consortium. And so I will ask Jan, Joost, or Dirk if you have any final comments before we log off.
I would like
this
to
is
thank
Dirk,
all the
and I want to thank Jan and Joost for their contribution. And again, this is from our perspective the start of a conversation on this, and so we look forward to the next iteration. And as Kyle mentioned, feel free to sign up and continue the dialogue with us.
This is Jan. Thank you very much for your interest. I'm very happy that you all participated.
Yeah, same for me. And I just repeat what Dr. Dirk just said. Please contact us, and we want to share this with you, and also for you to help us develop this protocol further. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Again, the consortium website is reducephl.org. If you have any other questions, please, that we didn't answer on the webinar, please reach out. We've really enjoyed this, and please tune in for our next webinars and the training that will be in 2 weeks. Thank you very much, and I think we made the hour. So
thank you.
I'm going to say goodbye to all.
Bye. Thank you all.